Trevor Deely. Trevor Deely was an exceptionally jovial, neighborly, and technically gifted young man. His passion for computers and talent for mathematics were abruptly cut short by an unexplainable and untraceable disappearance in December of 2000. This left all who knew him, both in person and through the World Wide Web, searching for answers in a sea of evidence that only deepened the mystery. In an attempt to provide more substantial reasoning based on tangible evidence and careful analysis, this is an exploration of Trevor Deely's disappearance and its possible connection to shadowy figures in the area. Trevor was born on August 15, 1978, in Naas, County Kildare, Ireland, to parents Michael and Anne Deely. The youngest of 4 children, he grew up under the close guidance of his older brother Mark and sisters Michelle and Pamela. His soft-spoken yet infectious childhood demeanor made him a likable kid, and even as a teenager, Trevor developed an even-tempered personality, getting along with basically anyone and everyone. His older siblings were all athletic in school, participating in sports and competitions. Trevor was the odd man out, however, and instead flourished as an athlete of the mind, finding a love for arithmetic and sciences. These interests in numbers and tech, combined with problem-solving tendencies, inspired Trevor to tinker with computers and audio-visual systems. It developed into a hobby for Trevor, but never seemed like a viable career choice. He was confused about where to focus his studies after graduating high school, testing out the waters of business and economics at Waterford Institute of Technology. During this period, he worked part-time at the local supermarket, but never felt truly comfortable and dropped out after the first semester. Remembering that Trevor had a gift for troubleshooting, his sister Michelle recommended a series of computer lessons in Dublin. Trevor obliged and quickly discovered his calling in life. Michelle was quoted in the Irish Times saying about her brother's newfound talents, "He took it like a duck to water, like turning a key in a lock." Trevor loved the coursework and soon devoted all of his energy to computers. When he finished the schooling, he was immediately offered 3 separate job opportunities. Seeking professional advice, Trevor turned to his dad, who was also quoted in the Irish Times. "I said, take the bank. Banks are safer than any of the others." This would turn out to be quite an unsettling foreshadow for the upcoming tragedy. 7 months before the turn of the millennium, Trevor took a position at Bank of Ireland Asset Management by Leeson Street Bridge in Dublin. He worked for the IT department in an office with 10 other employees who all raved about his work ethic and enthusiasm. Trevor's manager, Dara Tracy, described him as the perfect employee who was reliable on the job, hungry for knowledge and friendly with everyone at the company. The same was true in his personal life, as Trevor became especially close with his elder brother Mark and his 2 lifelong last buddies, Glenn Cullen and Conleith Loonan. In addition, Trevor had met a girl in his last summer in Dublin and traveled up to Anchorage, Alaska to see her only a month before this mystery began. Despite the bevy of cheers and positive relationships in Trevor's life, an unexpected, unforeseen darkness was on the horizon. During the holiday season of December 2000, Trevor's co-workers set up a company Christmas party at the Hilton Hotel in Dublin. The night was full of drinking and good vibes until early the next morning. At about 4 a.m., CCTV footage captured Trevor walking from the Bank of Ireland office towards his apartment in Ballsbridge, and this would soon prove to be the last sighting of Trevor Deely before his unexplainable disappearance. In May of 1999, Trevor Deely receives 3 job offers and decides to select an IT position at Bank of Ireland Asset Management on Wilton Terrace at the suggestion of his father. Trevor blends right into the working culture and forms healthy professional relationships with his peers. After the turn of the millennium, sometime in 2000, Trevor starts renting a flat on Serpentine Avenue, Sandy Mount, Dublin 4 in the Renoir complex. Along with him are 2 other female roommates, Neve and Sarah. The trio maintain a conflict-free living situation throughout the year. Later that summer, Trevor meets a girl named Karen, who is visiting Ireland on a vacation from Anchorage, Alaska. She is only in Dublin for a short while, but Trevor feels a romantic connection. None of Trevor's friends nor family get a chance to meet Karen. On the 7th October in the same year, Mark Dealey attends a GAA football match with Trevor in Castlebar, County Mayo. The brothers spend the day with a few additional friends, and Mark mentions it was at this moment that he saw Trevor as more than a sibling, but as a peer too. Mentioning, Trevor showed promise in his own life with both work and finances. It's the closest memory in their relationship, but was also proved to be the last. Sometime in the last couple weeks of November, Trevor and close friend Glenn Cullen have a conversation about Karen, the girl Trevor met in summertime. Glenn bets in passing that Trevor wouldn't go visit her in the States, to which Trevor retorts that he will. Nevertheless, he is soon added to Glenn's Aer Lingus discount beneficiary list and accesses a free flight from Ireland to Anchorage, Alaska. After stopping in Los Angeles, Trevor arrives in Alaska, where he intends to meet up with Karen. However, this point in the timeline is quite muddied in terms of what actually happened in Anchorage. Trevor's father, Michael, claims Trevor had more than one girl of interest in the States that he had met in Ireland, and claims that he found in Trevor's email a correspondence in which Trevor told one of the girls he was free for a few days and would come visit in person. The girl named Janie replied and said she would be busy during the specified dates, yet Trevor persisted and still made the trip. On the flip side, Trevor's brother Mark was confident the vacation wasn't out of the ordinary and was nothing more than a spree of relaxation that included a reconnection with his ex-girlfriend. A completely harmless coincidence. On Tuesday, December 5th, Trevor returns home from Alaska and hitches a bus back to the family home in Nice. His father only sees him in passing as he leaves for a work meeting. Meanwhile, an exhausted Trevor talks by the beautiful ice caps he witnessed. His mother encourages him to come home that weekend to tell them more about his recent trip, but Trevor says he plans to go Christmas shopping, so wouldn't be able to. The next day, Wednesday, December 6th, Trevor goes back to work at Bank of Ireland as normal. Sadly, abnormality strikes the very next day. At 4 p.m. on Thursday, December 7th, Trevor finishes work. According to Michael Dealey, he received a call from Trevor that late afternoon, during which he mentioned his apartment complex electricity was out. This meant Trevor was at his flat sometime after work on the day he disappeared. Later, in the early evening hours, Trevor also made a stop to his father's office to pick up prescription contact lenses sent by his brother, who was an optician. However, Michael Dealey was out in meetings during this time. Soon after, Trevor and a few friends hit up the Copper-Faced Jack's nightclub, where Trevor has the last known conversation with his father, Michael. At about 8:45 p.m., Trevor and the crew leave the club and go to nearby Hilton Hotel in Charlemagne Place, where the actual company Christmas party is being held. They enjoy a fancy dinner and live music. A couple of hours later, sometime between 10 and 11:30 p.m., Trevor receives another phone call, this time from best friend Glenn Cullen. Unfortunately, it's too noisy on Trevor's end for any clear communication. The friends end up playing phone tag the remainder of the night. In the small hours of Friday morning, December 8th, at about 2 a.m., Trevor and his friends leave the Hilton and arrive at Buck Whaley's on Leeson Street, another popular Dublin nightclub. The post-party festivities last around an hour and a half until 3:35 a.m. Trevor is captured on CCTV footage in front of his office's gate number 2 at Wilton Terrace. He has a brief conversation with a curious man wearing all black before heading into the office by himself. He thanks the building's security guard, Peter, for assisting him. It should be noted that the man wearing dark clothing has been seemingly waiting outside of Gate 1 for about 30 minutes prior to Trevor's arrival. At approximately 3:36 a.m., Trevor asks his co-worker, Carl Pender, if he's available for a quick cup of coffee. Carl says he's busy at the moment and asks Trevor to wait a moment or two. A minute later, at 3:37 a.m., further CCTV footage displays the same black-clothed man standing outside of Gate 2, this time with a second figure positioned next to him and a possible third person covered by shadows behind them. 10 minutes later, at around 3:50 a.m., Trevor finally shares a beverage with Carl. The recreational is short-lived, however, as Trevor is seen exiting the office at 4:03 a.m. through Gate 2, now holding an umbrella on CCTV video evidence. 2 minutes pass before Trevor calls his friend Glenn one final time, saying he'll call again later that day. This would be the last official point of contact Trevor makes with anyone specific. At 4:14 a.m., additional surveillance footage reveals Trevor walking past what was then an AIB bank on Haddington Road in the direction towards his Ballsbridge apartment. 30 seconds tick by and another passerby enters the frame. A man dressed in black, almost identical to the first shadowy figure from the Bank of Ireland's gateways. Other bystanders who were in the area at the time later recall seeing nothing out of the ordinary around. As he walks down the street out of view, it becomes the last known sighting of Trevor Deely. At 9:30 a.m. the same morning, Trevor does not show up for work. No action is taken. On multiple occasions over the weekend days of December 9th to December 10th, Trevor's sister Michelle makes several phone calls to Trevor, each time ringing, but ending up on voicemail. Michelle later remarks that she wasn't worried at the time, and was pretty sure his cell phone was active each time. Suspicions finally arise on Monday, December 11th, when Bank of Ireland informs Trevor's parents of his continued absence from work. Michael and Anne Deely then tell their older son, Mark, who immediately feels a strange discomfort in the atmosphere, and drives straight to the family home in Naas. Meanwhile, Michael goes to Trevor's apartment but receives no answer, either in person or on the phone. Mark continues the investigation efforts and searches both the Copperface Jack's nightclub and the Ballsbridge area. When no traces are found, Mark accompanies the friend, Glenn Cullen, back to Naas and reports Trevor missing to the Naas Garda station. A major manhunt breaks out the next day on December 12th, as the guard searches Trevor's flat and a sub-aqua team combs the nearby Grand Canal. Both efforts draw a blank. The searches continue into January 2001, with flyers handed out to townsfolk and additional bodies of water inspected. Trevor's friend, Conleth Lunan, even pitches in as a CCTV expert and researches partial footage from the night of his disappearance, but still no evidence is unearthed. Around February or March of 2015, 14 years after the mystery started, the Irish Times released a special 3-part series detailing the Trevor Deely case. Later in 2015, journalist Donald McIntyre creates an associated documentary that withholds a never-before-seen image of CCTV video outside the Bank of Ireland, unreleased by the Gardaí. It highlights the second and third man cloaked in darkness that are outside the gate after Trevor enters the building, a fact unknown to the general public until this moment. In December 2016, investigators reignite Trevor's cold case with the newfound CCTV footage and send it off for specialists in the UK to decipher the forensics of Trevor's final moments. Just 4 months later, in April of 2017, a company in the United Kingdom concurs that the man in black followed Trevor by 30 seconds in the last CCTV shot. It's most likely the man in black outside of his office in the first few shots. These initial images are enhanced and reveal that Trevor did indeed speak to the shadowy figure before entering the Bank of Ireland on that fateful night, again giving the public a new clue. This is the last accurate lead uncovered in the Trevor Deely file to date. Like all missing person cases and most criminal investigations in general, the most sought-after evidence is potential footage from the locations in which these crimes or mysteries occurred. In the search for Trevor Deely, one of his close friends, Conleth Lunan, was able to use his videotech expertise and pull partial CCTV footage from both the Bank of Ireland offices and the AIB offices mere days before they were to be destroyed. These tapes captured Trevor's last known moments in the early morning hours of December 8th, after he leaves the Christmas festivities to pick up an umbrella in his office and return home. It should be noted, the footage jumps a couple of points, most likely for time-keeping concerns. The first part of the video displays a man dressed in dark clothing who arrives outside of the Bank of Ireland at 3:05 a.m. The footage then jumps to about 3:34 a.m. with the man still lingering about before exiting the frame to our left. It then shifts to a different angle, recording Trevor arrive at work at 3:35 a.m. At this moment, what is assumed to be the black-clothed man pops back into the shot and talks to Trevor for a moment, or two. Trevor then heads inside before the footage jumps again to 4:02 a.m. But we see Trevor walk back onto the street with his umbrella and the suspicious man nowhere to be seen. The final piece of tape then plays at 4:14 a.m., showing a man under an umbrella passed by the AIP building. This is later confirmed as Trevor Deely by his family. 30 seconds later, a man dressed in black walks in the same direction as Trevor. This figure is thought to be the man from earlier waiting around the two gateways and the man who spoke briefly with Trevor. To this day, he has never come forward to be eliminated from the inquiry, and until he does, he is still very much a suspect. Yet the mystery of this man and the CCTV footage in general does not stop there. After the tapes were digitally remastered, documentarian Donald McIntyre released a film in 2015 called Unsolved, in which he revealed screenshots of unreleased footage depicting Trevor and the man in black outside of Gate 2 after Trevor had left. However, a closer inspection in 2017 uncovered that the time code on this new screenshot is actually from the time period in between Trevor entering and exiting Bank of Ireland. Thus, neither this man on our right side and the man standing in the back are Trevor himself. Rather, these are two new separate figures who appear to be looking into the office complex. Knowing this information, the image becomes much more unsettling, as these men are hidden behind their dark clothing and shadows. When authorities reopened the case, they were able to track down the men on the right and in the back. These two individuals were cleared as co-workers of Trevor and quickly crossed off the list of suspects. However, while they were there at the offices at the same time that evening, standing in the frame like they were is still unknown, leaving the entire CCTV case point in a shroud of doubt. Trevor Deely's disappearance occurred just over 18 years ago. Yet, with almost 2 full decades of sleuthing, both professionals and amateurs have come up empty-handed, failing to secure hard evidence or expose truth beyond coincidental and circumstantial assumptions. Despite the inconclusiveness of it all, there are a few notions that make sense when peeling back the layers of this case. First and foremost, many followers of the disappearance immediately point to Trevor's unquestionable trip to Alaska, less than a week before his disappearance. To make such a long journey a third of the way across the world for a girl he briefly knew makes little sense. Alaska is a 9 hours flight that spans 9 time zones and offers little tourist value for a basic short-term visit. So if the vacation was truly meant to rekindle a romantic spark, it was quite an extreme gesture considering Trevor only mentioned a girlfriend aspect of it in passing, mostly to his friends. Glenn Cullen remarked that he'd only heard of Trevor's love interest by word of mouth and never saw pictures of her or proof that she existed. The only possible physical identification was seen by Trevor's father through the email chain previously mentioned. However, the woman in the communication was called Janie, not Karen, and whether they were the same person or completely separate has not been clarified by investigators, nor has confirmation that a search was done of the email correspondence discovered by Michael between Trevor and Janie. The general consensus now is that there was no girl, and that the stories about meeting college students from Anchorage was a cover-up for some other type of business or personal quest. Rural Alaska is a mystery in and of itself, and the number of potential activities kept a secret is too vast to go through, but could include any number of operations, such as money laundering, drug trafficking, or gang violence. How Trevor could ever be connected to such vices is both unknown and unlikely, but his expertise with computers and mathematics make him a useful person for any of these activities. In rebuttal, there is a little likelihood that Trevor was able to keep such multinational offenses under wraps from everyone and leave behind no traces. While he was proficient with computer systems, he had no history or record associating him with virtual crimes. He was an outgoing, friendly individual, and pursuing a woman he liked isn't unusual for a man of his age, especially considering the tickets were free. Mark Deely said in the Irish Times article that the trip to Anchorage was like any young adult attempting to find paradise, and Alaska was just a colder version of hotspots like Ibiza or Lanzarote. Trevor did seem flattered by the grand surroundings of Alaska ice caps in his short time spent with his mother after he returned, which is probably a genuine emotion rather than a cover for illicit activity. In the end, both the Deely family and investigators classified the Alaskan trip a red herring in the case, after both parties interrogated the girl in question and no leads were produced. Another popular hypothesis believes Trevor was killed that morning on the way home to his apartment by a ruthless Kremlin-based criminal, anonymous to everyone, but to guard officials. This theory originated from a tip given to Gardaí by an informant who claimed that Trevor had run in with a crumbling criminal who was shot and murdered before being dumped in a wooded area in West Dublin. The crumbling criminal had also been investigated for the unsolved murder of Sinead Kelly in June 1996. The criminal in question was never publicly identified due to legal reasons. Investigators said the informant himself had no motive for the crime, but didn't hold any serious weight with the tip, despite the fact that the crumbling criminals gang was running a drug and prostitution trade in the surrounding area of Trevor's disappearance at the time he was last seen. Nevertheless, Gardaí eventually took this information under consideration and dug up a 3-acre forest in the Chapel Leasehold area to look for Trevor's remains. The secret crumbling criminal was eventually cleared after the informant's information was proven wrong, and no traces of Trevor were found in the excavation. Other theories focus on the black-clothed man from CCTV footage, offering a flurry of ideas that he could be a modernized version of the Men in Black conspiracy, and was at the offices that night to talk to Trevor about something supernatural he had witnessed, possibly during his time in Alaska. It would explain Trevor's subtle yet repeated fascination with the Alaskan atmosphere and why the Man in Black followed Trevor home. If the Man in Black did kidnap Trevor, it might back up the complete lack of physical DNA or evidence left behind. It should be noted that the Deely family have heavily denounced this line of thought and does not consider it tangible. In more realistic terms, followers of the case have suggested Trevor was kidnapped and murdered by the crumbling gang that morning, but instead of being buried, he was thrown into a body of water. Gardaí officials have combed through countless rivers, ponds, and canals around the Dublin area, and again have found no clues related to Trevor. It's also peculiar that Trevor's sister, Michelle, called her brother's cell phone over the course of the weekend, in which Trevor was unknown to be missing, and the cellular emitted a series of rings rather than go straight to voicemail. This hints that the cell phone died before it was potentially destroyed, and either Trevor or his kidnapper had access to it for up to 48 hours past 4:15 a.m. on December 8, 2000. A case like Trevor Dinnie's with infinite pathways, but zero destinations is incredibly difficult to conclude. However, there are just enough holes in the profile to poke through with calculated observations. These anomalies, combined with the CCTV, leads us to believe that Trevor knew something he shouldn't have, was followed by people he shouldn't have known, and he realized it, and was eventually taken away against his will. What exactly this information was, or who exactly the people it was connected to, is impossible to crack. But without a doubt, it probably centered around illegal practices of a criminal nature. It was the type of forbidden knowledge that led to him being hunted down, kidnapped, and murdered. The first big piece of this conclusion is the conflicting information given by Trevor himself. Specifically, the two-faced schedule he gave to both his parents and his friends. After returning from Alaska, he told his parents he wouldn't be coming back home to Nace the following weekend so that he could finish some Christmas shopping. At the time, he made plans with friends Glenn and Conleth to get drinks that weekend at Thomas Fletcher's Pub, a local bar in his hometown. While it could have been an honest mistake or intentional to avoid talking to his parents about Alaska, It kind of feels like Trevor wasn't telling the truth to either party. He might have had his own agenda over the weekend, maybe to take care of the issue at hand, and led both his friends and families astray. In fact, his absence at the pub was regarded as a normal occurrence by Glenn and Conleth, as neither felt worried or even bothered to contact Trevor when he never showed up for drinks. In addition, Trevor displayed a few moments of subtle nervous behavior after his return from Alaska. Besides mismanaging the information he gave up about his weekend plans, Trevor's actions the hours before his disappearance strike us as odd. For example, when Trevor walks up to Gate 2 at Bank of Ireland and speaks to the black-clothed man, he spends little time engaging with him and enters the building soaking wet, seemingly in a hurry to get home. However, instead of grabbing the umbrella and departing, Trevor asked the night shift employee Carl Pender to share a cup of tea. When Carl asked for a few moments to finish his task, Trevor didn't leave. Instead, he logged onto his computer and performed unknown actions, as if waiting for something to happen and pass the time. Then, when Carl was available, the two shared hot beverages and conversed about nothing in particular for 10 minutes before Trevor finally left. This entire exchange is very odd. Why spark up conversations with a colleague at work on a Friday night at almost 4 in the morning? And when you find they are busy, why get on the computer and mess around as if it's a dire meeting, only to chit-chat aimlessly for a few minutes? What did he do on the computer, and what did he and Carl discuss? Carl does not remember the details, but is certain it was not an emergency or dire conversation, and that Trevor was also in a stable mindset and not drunk like people assume after the evening of drinks and parties. The entire 25-minute episode seemed as if Trevor had something bothering him, most likely stemming from the sudden appearance of the man in black outside waiting for him. There are also a few pieces of the puzzle that were either ignored or poorly investigated altogether, with very little information being released by officials afterwards. First, the electricity being out at Trevor's apartment complex on the day he disappeared feels more than coincidental. He called in maintenance to fix the issue earlier in the day, and it seems that they do by the time he arrives home from work, but why or how? The flat's lost electricity is never explained and possibly never investigated in the first place. It would be fascinating to hear from other people living in the complex at that time, to hear if they remember the power going out, or if they saw any suspicious figures hanging around the building's electrical panel in the days prior. Not only that, but the apartment in general was never completely ruled out as being the last place Trevor visited. Guard officials believed he never went home that night, but we have no recorded information about the state of Trevor's flat, and if there were signs of a struggle, an intentional leave, or DNA forensics. Secondly, Gardet claimed they searched Trevor's computer and email for any evidence and came up empty-handed. However, analyzing audiovisual systems was not as thorough in the year 2000 as it is today, and another debrief of Trevor's internet history could prove useful if released to the public. Travers was a technical mastermind anyway, so it is possible he hid any sequence out of reach to the local government shoddy computer searches. Third, it's infuriating to think police let Trevor's last known bit of communication get deleted without second thoughts. Trevor was confirmed to have called his friend Glenn at 4:05 a.m., and according to Glenn, left a voicemail that said little besides that he'd call again soon to talk and catch up on recent events. Investigators thought this to be a routine message, and after Glenn agreed, there was nothing out of the ordinary to his ears. Gardet allowed Glenn to delete the message. This is gross negligence by police in missing person cases. Any bit of communication left by the victim needs to be preserved. Even if it was a 5-second hello and goodbye, you never know what could be extracted from the background. Every piece of evidence deserves its due diligence and to be put under a microscope. So, while it probably had no effect on the search for Trevor, its absence from public access and 100% clarity leaves a tiny hole in the case. Finally, we must address the two supposed colleagues of Trevor who appear in the newly released CCTV footage screenshots. Authorities were quick to identify the man on the right and the man on the back as co-workers, but never shared any details beyond this fact other than that they were cleared of any wrongdoing. So, who were they exactly? What are their names? What are they also doing at work at 3:40 in the morning? Did they accompany Trevor from the Christmas party back to work to make sure he arrived safely? If so, why do they stand so strangely in the frame, positioned in a bizarre manner as if they are waiting and looking at Trevor with a bit of shadowy intimidation? And if they were waiting, why did they leave prematurely? Did they know the first man? Did they confront him, or are they able to identify the mysterious figure? It's mind-boggling to think that they were ruled out despite appearing in the most mysterious question-peddling piece of evidence, which is missing critical segments in the first place. When did the second and third subjects leave? Where does the first man go? Do they converse? This footage is sadly unavailable and could have been destroyed from the time of origin. It's quite possible the two colleagues were interviewed and provided alibis and explanations, but without documented proof, it's hard to accept such leniency. In the end, taking into consideration Bank and asked Trevor if they could talk before he went inside. Office with Carl. Meanwhile, Trevor's fellow colleagues stopped by to check on his well-being, and when the man in black told them Trevor had gone inside for a while, the co-workers decided to leave not long thereafter. Trevor then came back outside to an abandoned gate too, and went about his business ignorant to the black cloth man following behind him discreetly. This man or his potential associates confronted Trevor again at his flat since his roommates were away on holiday. There were probably other people with the man back at the apartment as backup, and were probably responsible for the electrical outage at the complex. When Trevor insisted his innocence, the man realized it was too late for such a plea, and Trevor had to go before he revealed what he possibly knew. Trevor was then kidnapped, kept alive somewhere for a period of time before a homicide, and eventually disposed of in a place where he wouldn't be recovered, probably out of the country or in the surrounding areas. Like all unsolved cases, Trevor Delis is truly one left up in the air. This conclusion takes into account all of the investigation's strengths and weaknesses and attempts to build the most likely, if not fully conclusive answer. Since the restored CCTV footage was released in 2015 and the false alarm search at the chapel's Odd Woods, no new leads have been unearthed. However, Guardian officials did release a statement in December of 2018 that they would be going back to unidentified human remains still in storage to utilize breakthrough DNA technology and test the pieces for any trace of Trevor. If anything, it provides a newfound hope for the Dealey family, who have over the years refused to consider conspiracies and simply ask that Trevor's fate be solved. Whether that means a body or not, they just want something concrete. Sister Michelle Dealey was quoted in the Irish Times saying, "I don't believe people vanish. It makes no sense to me. It actually starts to hurt your brain when you think about it." She, along with her parents, siblings, and Trevor's friends, just want closure and for the 18 years of nightmares to finally end. It's ordinary people like us who can take on these challenges and help combat the growing number of missing persons cases. We wouldn't report on this if we didn't believe it could remind the world, spread awareness, and potentially uncover a new clue or lead that might bring us closer to the truth. It's crucial not to forget that before this case went cold, Trevor was a human being, a man with a future in technology, community, teamwork, and resourcefulness. He was infectiously friendly, with a positive attitude that left a lasting impression on his peers, always spreading good. His dedication to problem-solving and compassion touched countless lives, and we hope that impact will continue to influence others soon. Until then, the search for answers continues as we push for clarity and fight to uncover the truth behind the disappearance of Trevor Dealey and the mystery of the men in the shadows. Moving on to the next case. The Vanishing Triangle. Just outside of Dublin lies an area known to locals as the Vanishing Triangle. Between 1993 and 1998, 8 women mysteriously vanished within this 80-mile stretch, never to be seen or heard from again. Despite extensive media coverage and large-scale searches by Irish police, none of the women were ever found. 3 months later, on a fateful day, 39-year-old Eva Brennan left her parents' house in Rathgar, Dublin, and walked down Temple Oak Road to return to her apartment in Rathgar. 2 days later, Eva's father, concerned after not hearing from her, went to her apartment, as they hadn't seen or heard from her since she left their house. Eva's family was worried due to the fact that Eva had been depressed prior. After ringing the doorbell and getting no answer, Eva's father went down to the pub the family owned, the Horse and Hound, and asked a barman to help him gain entry into Eva's apartment. They ended up smashing a window to enter her apartment, and they found nothing out of place. There was no sign of Eva, however. Her jacket that she was wearing the day she left her parents' house was in her room, so she left her parents' house was in her room, so she did make it home that evening. Her family did find that her bag and keys were missing, though. Where she went to after returning from her parents' house remains a mystery. Even though Eva was depressed, her family does not believe she would commit suicide, as she didn't leave a note or give any indication of feeling suicidal. Interestingly enough, the police did not take her disappearance seriously for the first 3 months. After they found out that Eva was missing, her parents went to the police immediately, but were told that because Eva was an adult and there was nothing out of place at her apartment, they couldn't do anything. The police listed her as a missing person but did nothing else for 3 months. After much protest from the family, police finally decided to gather evidence from her apartment and her parents' home, but unfortunately, all vital evidence at that point was lost. Garda have been criticized on their handling of Eva's disappearance, and she remains missing to this day. Josephine Dollard, known as JoJo Joe to her friends and family, was a 21-year-old beautician from Cuffs, Grange County, Kilkenny. She was the youngest of 5 children and lost her parents at a very young age. Her father passed away before she was born, and her mother when she was just 12 years old. On November 9, 1995, JoJo was making her way home from Dublin to Cowling, Kilkenny. JoJo had traveled to Dublin to remove herself from the dole, Ireland's unemployed benefits scheme, as she had gotten a job at Granger's restaurant in her hometown. She had recently dropped out of a beauty therapy course as well after finding it very difficult to juggle work and college. She had missed her bus home to Callan and had to take a bus to Naas County, Kildare, instead. She then decided to hitchhike home from there. She was driven from there to Kilcullen and then from Kilcullen to Moon. She was last seen using a payphone from a telephone box in the village of Moon, and through telephone records, police found the call was made at 11:37 p.m. to JoJo's friend Mary Cullinan. She told her that she was having difficulty getting a lift, but while on that call, a car pulled up, and she hurriedly hung up saying a lift had arrived. This was the last time she was ever heard from. A short time later, a woman similar to JoJo's description was seen leaving the back door of a dark-colored Toyota Carina-type car. The driver or occupants of this Toyota have never come forward or been traced. There was also an unconfirmed sighting of her walking along the road in Castledermot County, Kildare. When she never reached her destination, JoJo's family became concerned and reported her missing to the police. Garda received reports from the first 2 drivers who gave JoJo a lift, one from outside the Garda station in Naas to Kilcullen, and the next from Kilcullen to Moon. The driver who left her in Moon says he left phone box, which was well lit up and where she intended to call her friend. But the driver or occupants from the drive from Moon to Castledermot have never come forward. It is believed that she was abducted between 11:50 p.m. and 12:05 a.m. Despite an extensive search of the area, there was no sign of JoJo, and there was no sign of a struggle along the road in Moon. Later, a taxi driver came forward and claimed that on the morning of 10th November 1995, at about 1:20 a.m., while he was driving, he saw a red car with English plates parked at the side of the main road in Kilmacow, 3 miles north of Waterford. He said that one man was urinating beside the car and suddenly a woman ran from the left-hand rear door out of the car towards the front. She was barefoot and seemed distressed. Then, a second man appeared from the back of the car and he followed the woman, grabbed her by her hair, got her in a bear hug, and then dragged her back to the car. They then took off in the direction of Waterford. Another witness told police that a girl matching JoJo's description was seen in apparent distress in Waterford around 2 or 2:30 a.m. that same night. However, none of these sightings have been confirmed, and JoJo remains missing to this day. Ciara Breen was an 18-year-old from Dundalk County, Louth. On 13th February 1997, Ciara and her mother, Bernadette, had gone out with her mother to a local cafe, after which they had gone home and watched TV until they went to bed at around 12:25 a.m. At 2 a.m., Bernadette had gotten up to use the bathroom and realized that Ciara was no longer in her bed. The bedroom window was left on the latch, leading to the belief that Ciara snuck out of the house through the front door for a prearranged meeting, leaving the window open so she could climb back in later. Ciara did not bring any money or clothes with her. Ciara Breen was never seen again. An extensive police investigation at the time failed to locate her. In 2014, 2 credible witnesses came forward with sightings of Ciara from the night she disappeared, and in 2015, a man in his 50s, Liam Molan, was arrested, but was later released without being charged. His arrest led to the search of an area called Balmer's Bog in August-September of 2015, but no traces of Ciara could be found. At the time of her disappearance, a number of witnesses claimed that Ciara had snuck out of her house to meet Mullen, and Mullen was arrested in 1999, but he maintained his innocence up until his death in 2017. The police believe Ciara was murdered on the night she vanished, but have never found her remains. Fiona Pinder was a 25-year-old hairdresser and part-time model. She was living with her boyfriend, John Thompson, in her apartment in Tullamore County, Offaly. At that time, she was 7 months pregnant and had spent the previous day shopping for baby clothes with her mother in Tullamore. She was in good form and was looking forward to the birth of her baby. On August 23, 1996, John left their apartment to go to work on the family farm between Killy and Mount Mallock. Later that day, one of Fiona's friends called out for Fiona at her flat, but she got no reply. The curtains were drawn and she presumed Fiona might be in bed. The next day, Fiona's family called John because they couldn't get a hold of her. John told them that he hadn't seen her since the previous morning when he left for work. Her family reported her missing to the police. In the following weeks, months, searches took place across the boglands, woods, and rivers. 4 miles of the Royal Canal was drained to no avail. Thompson became the prime suspect in the case, but he consistently denied having any involvement with the disappearance. In April of 1997, Thompson, his 3 sisters, and his father were arrested and held for 12 hours for questioning in relation to the disappearance, but were later released without charge. In a newspaper interview after his arrest, Thompson said he last saw Fiona in their flat, still asleep in bed when he left for work at 6 a.m. He also said she could not have disappeared from a busy town without being seen by someone. Thompson had been going out with Fiona for 3 years, and they had been living together for a year. It is believed she may have left later in a navy t-shirt, white leggings, blue and white trainers, and a pink jacket. In 2008, a small wooden cross bearing the name Fiona Pender was found on the Slieve Bloom Way at the border between Leos and Offaly, which led to the belief that Fiona was buried in the Slave Bloom Mountains. But searches by sniffer dogs of the surrounding area failed to locate any trace of the missing woman. The cross was inscribed with the words, Fiona Pender, buried here August 22, 1996, but police now believe it was placed there as a cruel prank. In the last few years, a woman living abroad has told police that while in a rage, her husband had threatened her and strongly implied that he had killed Fiona, and that she, his wife, would be next. The woman even pinpointed an exact location in Ireland where she believed the body was buried. However, the information came to nothing, and no conviction was brought against her husband. A year before Fiona's disappearance, her 22-year-old brother Mark died in a motorcycle accident. In 2000, her father, Sean, took his own life, a death her mother attributes to his heartbreak over the loss of his 2 children. Fiona's mother had campaigned tirelessly for information on her daughter following her disappearance. She passed away at the age of 68 without knowing what happened to her daughter. Deirdre Jacob was 18 years old from Newbridge County, Kildare, Ireland. A student in London, Deirdre had returned to her family home for the summer months in 1998. On July 28, 1998, at 12 p.m., Deirdre walked from the family home into Newbridge and visited her grandmother's shop. At roughly 12 to 10 p.m., she went to the AIB bank in Newbridge and then to the post office. She needed to get a bank draft from her second year of student accommodation in London. She then returned to her grandmother's shop before heading home again via the Barrettstown Road. The last sighting of Deirdre was between 3 and 3:30 p.m. Deirdre was sighted by 8 people, 6 of whom knew her. A man cycled past Deirdre and recognized her. Then 2 people speaking on a footpath said hello as Deirdre passed by. Next, a man walking on a roof recognized Deirdre walking by, and then at the bog cross, 2 people up a road saw Deirdre as she crossed the road facing oncoming traffic. She was now just a few minutes from home. Neighbors said that she actually had made it to within just 200 yards of her house, but bizarrely, she never managed to actually get there. When Deirdre did not arrive home by 7 p.m., her family reported her missing. An extensive search for her began that night, but no trace of Deirdre was found. There is extensive CCTV footage of Deirdre walking through the town of Newbridge on the day she went missing, July 28, 1998. When last seen, she was wearing a navy Nike jumper with a white collar and blue jeans and blue Nike running shoes. She was carrying a black bag with "cat" written in yellow on the flap. The distinctive bag Deirdre carried that day was never located. It remains a crucial part of the investigation. There are a further 2 sightings of her at a cafe on Tara Street, Dublin on the 30th, 31st July, but these sightings have never been confirmed, and she remains missing to this day. Annie was an American from Long Island, New York, an only child with a lifelong interest in her Irish heritage. In 1993, she immigrated to Dublin to do a diploma course so she could get a job teaching in Ireland. She landed in Ireland in January of 1993 and rented a flat in the Sandymount area of Dublin. She took a part-time job in a restaurant and shared the flat with 2 Irish women. On Friday 26th of March in 1993, the day before her 27th birthday, Annie went to a local AIB bank where she was seen on CCTV waiting in the queue. She then went to a nearby Kinsworth supermarket and picked up groceries for an arranged dinner party that she was having with friends the next day on her birthday. She then invited a friend to go with her to spend a day in the Wicklow Mountains, but her friend was unable to come, so McCarrick decided to go alone. She was sighted on the 44 bus from Ranelagh to Enniskerry at 3:40 p.m. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her. Sometime between 9 and 11 p.m., Annie was supposedly seen in Johnny Fox's pub, a popular tourist spot in the Dublin Mountains, approximately 4 miles from Enniskerry, with an unknown man who was in his 20s and wearing a waxed jacket. A doorman working in Johnny Fox's at the time claimed he saw Annie entering with a man who paid for her entrance fee as she hadn't realized there was a A2 cover charge. He also claimed that Annie was looking around after entering the pub as if looking for someone already there. Both the man and Annie were seen at the pub till the evening. However, no one saw Annie leave the pub, and the man who was with her has never been identified. Annie has never been seen since. On that same day, she was supposed to pick up her paycheck, but she never did. The following day, friends showed up at Annie's house to celebrate her birthday, but she wasn't there. Shortly after, they contacted her parents, John and Nancy McCarrick, in New York, and they reported her missing to the police. A large-scale search was immediately launched for Annie. Annie's parents arrived in Ireland shortly after Annie was reported missing. A composite sketch of the man seen with Annie was distributed around the city, but Annie was never found. Imelda Keenan, 22, was originally from Mount Malak County, Laos. Imelda attended the Central Technical Institute in Waterford, where she undertook a computer course for a short period. Imelda was living with her boyfriend, Mark Wall, in Waterford City. They both lived in an apartment in the town on William Street. On January 3, 1994, Imelda told Wall that she was going to the post office. She left the apartment at 1:30 p.m. and walked down William Street onto Lombard Street. She was last seen by a local doctor's secretary, who knew her well, while crossing the road near Tower Hotel. She was never seen again. On February 8, 1998, mother of one, Fiona Sinnott, was sitting with her friends in a local pub called Butler's in a small village of Broadway County, Wexford. Fiona's ex-boyfriend, Sean Carroll, was also at the pub. However, he was sitting at the bar alone, smoking and having a pint. Fiona left the pub with her ex-boyfriend and father to her 11-month-old daughter. This was the last time that Fiona was seen in public. She was not reported missing until February 18th because she frequently left for short periods of time. Every Friday, Fiona would get on a bus into Wexford town so she could meet up with her family for coffee. When she failed to show up for the second week in a row, her family reported her missing. During his conversation with investigators, Carroll told them that he had walked Fiona back to her house in Ballyhit, Wexford, and that he had spent the night sleeping on her couch. The next morning, Fiona, who had been complaining of pains in her upper body previously, said she intended on hitching a lift to her physician later that day to talk about the pains. Because Fiona said that she had no money, Carroll told police he had given her and left her house to go to his mother waiting outside in a car for him to take him home. Carroll and his mother then drove back to their family home, which was where Fiona's daughter, Emma, had been staying at the time. This was the last date that anyone would report seeing Fiona alive. Fiona never attended her physician's office that day, or any other doctor's in fact, and no witnesses came forward to prove that she had even attempted to hitch a lift. During a technical examination of Fiona's house, police noticed that it had been stripped bare of a number of her personal belongings. According to retired Detective Sergeant Alan Bailey, there was a quote, "Complete absence of clothing and other personal items indicating that a teenage girl and her 11-month-old daughter were actually living there." Later, locals would report that they had seen a number of black garbage bags outside of the property. A few days later, a farmer came forward to police stating that he had found a number of black garbage bags containing personal items from Fiona, including documents with her name on them. But the farmer had destroyed the bags as he was under the impression that they were being illegally dumped. The police began to speculate that someone may have tried to stage the house as if Fiona had run away. Some speculated that Fiona had left the country with a Welsh trucker. 2 nights before Fiona disappeared, she had spent the night with a trucker in his cab. The police questioned the trucker, but his alibi checked out as he was able to prove to investigators that he had been driving in the country when Fiona went missing. He was ruled out as a suspect. According to her friends and family, Fiona was looking forward to celebrating her daughter's first birthday, as well as her sister's upcoming 21st birthday. She even had plans to go to Waterford so she could buy her sister a birthday present. Her family doesn't believe she would have just run away. Information was received after her disappearance suggesting that a male was finding it very difficult to live with the role he had taken in disposing of Fiona's body. The person whom he was confiding in suggested he tip the police off anonymously about the location of Fiona's body. The distressed male refused to do so, claiming that, including the murderer, only 2 other people knew the exact location of the teenager's body, and tipping the police off would be the same as signing his own death warrant. This male died of a suspected drug overdose in 2 to 1. In 2005, police arrested 3 men and women in connection with Fiona's disappearance but were later released without any charge. On 12 September 2008, a memorial plaque for Fiona was stolen from a cemetery in Our Lady's Island in County Wexford. The marble plaque, which had been cemented onto the wall, was removed the night before it was due to be unveiled. A second plaque has since been erected in the same spot, and this too has been stolen. Fiona remains missing to this day. As the number of missing young women began to accumulate, the public started to panic. In just 6 years, 8 young women vanished without a trace. In all of these cases, the victims shared some common characteristics. The women were all young, ranging from their late teens to up to 40 years of age, and were described as looking quite young for their ages. In each case, they seemed to vanish inexplicably and suddenly, and in all of the cases, no substantial clues or evidence of their fate. No shoes, no belts, no purses, no watches. Nothing has ever been found despite large-scale searches and campaigns by the Irish police force. Another important characteristic is that all disappearances occurred in an area which became known in the media as the Vanishing Triangle. The triangle stretches from Wexford in the south to Louth in the north and to Offaly in the west. Due to similarities in the cases, some started to speculate that a serial killer or killers were responsible for all the disappearances. Along with private investigators, a special task force called Operation Trace was formed in 1998 to find the women. Operation Trace drafted in 2 FBI agents to assist in the operation, and together with the National Bureau of Criminal Investigations, NBCI, they examined the files on the missing women. The agents were specialized in profiling serial killers and rapists. They focused on the 6 main vanishings: Annie McCarrick, Jojo Dollard, Fiona Pender, Sierra Breen, Deirdre Jacob, and Fiona Sinnott, and came to the conclusion that the woman had likely been murdered. Despite an extensive investigation by the Irish police, Operation Trace, the public, and the families, these women and their abductors have never been identified, although there were some possibly promising leads. One of the most promising suspects was a convicted rapist, Larry Murphy. In 2000, Murphy abducted a woman he was stalking, threw her in his car's trunk, and raped her several times out in the Wicklow Mountains before trying to strangle her to death. He was surprised by 2 hunters who happened upon the scene and intervened, saving the woman. He was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. While Murphy was in jail, the disappearances ceased. It was discovered that Murphy lived and worked in the same area where Jojo Dillard and Deirdre Jacob had vanished. He allegedly also matched the description given for the man last seen with Annie McCarrick, leading some to believe that he may have been involved in some or all of the mysterious disappearances. However, Murphy has maintained that he has nothing to do with the disappearances and has been questioned about the cases on numerous occasions by the police. Murphy, a carpenter, had also completed some work in a shop owned by Deirdre's grandmother. But Deirdre's mother doesn't believe that Larry Murphy was responsible for her daughter's disappearance. Despite all of these, police have never been able to charge Murphy for the disappearances. To date, there's no solid evidence connecting Murphy to the crimes. Another possible suspect was an IRA member who was found to have possibly been with Annie McCarrick on the night she disappeared and divulged secret information to her. Police received information that the man had told another IRA member that he had given Annie a ride from Johnny Fox's pub to a bus station in Bray before her disappearance. It was suspected that he had actually murdered her to keep her quiet and buried her body in the mountains. This man has a history of sexually assaulting children. Suspiciously, the IRA moved the man to France and then later to the U.S. shortly after McCarrick's disappearance. So far, Robert Howard has not been charged for any of the disappearances and remains a free man. Known as Wolfman by the media, Howard is considered a potential suspect in the case. A convicted sex offender, he was sentenced to life in prison in 2003 for the rape and murder of 14-year-old Hannah Williams in 2001. Howard's criminal history includes multiple convictions for rape, and he is believed to be connected to the murders of several women across England and Northern Ireland. His offenses include the sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl and a 58-year-old woman. Howard's criminal activity occurred around the same time that several women in the Vanishing Triangle were disappearing. and he is suspected of being in Ireland when Annie McCarrick went missing. However, there has never been sufficient evidence to link him to these crimes. The disappearances have been featured in documentaries and books, but due to the lack of concrete evidence and the complexity of the cases, the mystery of Ireland's vanishing triangle remains unsolved. Moving on to the next case. Mary Angus Cowan. On May 14, 1985, someone saw an injured woman on the west side of Highway 91 in Newton, Georgia. When a bystander noticed her, they drove the unnamed woman to a hospital. The woman passed away on June 1, 1985, from her wounds. Although the Office of the Examiner was unable to ascertain the exact origin of her injuries, they recorded subdural hematoma as a result of blunt force trauma to the head. Her identity would remain a mystery for a while since they were also unable to identify her. In 2012, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation exhumed the woman's remains. A bone fragment was sent for analysis but produced no leads. In 2022, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Sylvester Regional Investigative Office, in partnership with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, submitted a portion of the remains to the private DNA lab and, you guessed it, Othram. After completing the DNA extraction, a profile was generated and given to the FBI for genealogical comparisons. Agents then determined that the unknown woman is Mary Angus Cowan, after the DNA sample came up as a match with one of her children. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation had this to say in a statement. The research yielded a high probability that the unidentified woman was Mary Angus Cowan, aka Angie. Her agents obtained DNA from one of Cowan's children, and the comparison indicated a parent-slash-child relationship. The assistance of the Baker County Sheriff's Office, Othram, and the FBI Atlanta and Baltimore offices were instrumental in identifying these remains and providing closure for the family. Mary's daughter, Angelique Hall, also spoke at the press conference in February of 2023. I was 10 years old, and she was fun, and she was silly, and then one day she was gone. I knew she was gone, she added, and I never imagined that they would find her. This is a shock from Georgia finding out that not only was her body found, but that the town picked her up out of a ditch and took care of her last days. She was loved, and I hear that she was buried. Investigators are still trying to determine what events led to Mary being fatally injured in 1985. Before we continue, we want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Moving on to the next case. Susan Osborne. Described as an independent woman and devoted mother, 43-year-old Susan Osborne believed she had found happiness in 2017. She was living in Holtville, Alabama, with her 14-year-old son, Evan Chartrand, her 2 dogs, and her husband of 3 years, Jerry Osborne. By all accounts, she seemed content with her life. However, everything changed when Susan and Evan went missing. As investigators delved into the lives of Susan and her family, it became clear that not everything was as it appeared. Originally from Michigan, Susan had moved to Alabama in 2005 after marrying the father of her first child, Evan. Even though they divorced shortly afterwards, the mother of one decided not to return to her home state despite being far away from her extended family. Eventually, Susan met another man and gave birth to a daughter. However, the relationship disintegrated around 2009. Another 5 years would pass before a new opportunity for love arose in the form of Jerry Osborne, an Air Force veteran and 911 dispatcher. Susan admired how good he was with her children, and she saw him as generous and gentle. On January 25, 2014, the pair tied the knot and the family moved to Holtville, where Jerry had purchased a home on Waterview Lane near Highway 111. At first, Jerry seemed like a cautious and protective man. He had an intricate and high-tech security system installed in the home and several CCTV cameras. But as friends and family would later notice, it seemed that Jerry's vigilant behavior began crossing into the territory of controlling. By 2015, Susan had started distancing herself from her loved ones. They would later discover that this was because her new husband was monitoring her calls and texts. Similarly, Susan's brother Brian reported that in January 2015, she and her family came to visit her ill father and plans to go ice fishing later on during the trip. Both Susan and 14-year-old Evan loved to fish. However, the family never showed up to their scheduled activity. Instead, Susan messaged Brian to tell him she, Jerry, and the children were on their way back to Alabama. Her family never got to say goodbye. Loved ones also added that at the time of Susan and Evan's disappearance in 2017, they'd met Jerry less than a handful of times. In 2016, Susan grew concerned when she discovered a photo of her husband on Craigslist advertising him himself as a male escort. She recognized him by his distinguishable tattoos. She believed that he was working as an escort behind her back and emailed a friend to admit to what she'd found. She stated that she was going to start preparing to leave Jerry, noting that she'd need to get a job so that her children would receive health insurance and secure somewhere to stay. Susan also asked her friends not to mention any of this by text, confessing that Jerry read all of her messages. The friend Susan contacted, Holly Morris, had reportedly been afraid for the safety of Susan and her children for some time and encouraged her to leave. Holly and Susan had met 9 years earlier when they lived in the same neighborhood and had remained best friends even after Susan moved to Holtville. Despite her concerns and plans, though, Susan never left Jerry. She emailed Holly sometime after her initial message and stated that she and Jerry had worked things out and that she still loved him and wanted to give things another go. Holly remained worried, but recognized there was only so much she could say to her friend to encourage her to go. For Mother's Day in May 2017, Susan's mother Linda traveled to Alabama to visit her and the children. Their time together was noted to have been completely normal. Similarly, on May 16th, Susan and Jerry helped Holly and her fiancé finish packing. The couple plans to move out to Florida as part of Holly's fiancé's job. 10 days later, on May 26th, Susan spent time with her daughter, who was not living with her at the time, though Susan had visitation rights. The next day, she spoke with Holly on the phone and noted that Evan was off school because he was sick. The two spoke again the following day and exchanged a few texts the day after that, on 29th. Then all communication with Susan and Evan ceased. Holly, for her part, thought that Susan was simply busy. Life sometimes got in the way of their communication, but never for that long. Susan's mother became alarmed when she was repeatedly unable to reach her daughter or her grandson as the weeks passed. While at first she brushed off their lack of communication as a phone bill that hadn't been paid, or maybe even a broken phone, the knot of worry in her stomach became more and more pronounced as time went by. Linda eventually decided to send her daughter an old-fashioned letter, but it came back as undelivered. 2 months had passed before Evan and Susan were officially reported missing on July 29, 2017. 2 days later, on July 31st, officers from the Elmore County Sheriff's Office visited the family's residence in Holtville to carry out a welfare check. Upon their arrival, they spotted Susan's car still in the driveway. Jerry was the one to answer the front door, explaining that he was in the middle of cleaning. A strong smell of incense and candles wafted out from inside the building, and there was a burned barrel alight in the back garden. When pressed about the whereabouts of his wife and stepchild, Jerry told investigators that he and Susan had fought on Memorial Day, May 27th, and that she and Evan had climbed into a truck with a man he didn't know and hadn't come home. He said he believed they were heading to Birmingham and noted that the driver never left the vehicle, although he was able to describe him as 6 foot tall with a beard and sunglasses. Jerry then claimed he'd gone to visit his parents and that when he had returned, Evan and Susan's belongings were gone, and they had vandalized the home, spray painting rude words on the floors and walls. This, he claimed, was the reason he'd repainted some of the walls and replaced some of the flooring with new carpet. After the officers left, Holly contacted them and told them all she knew. from Jerry's red flags to the incident with the escort advertisement to the couple's reconciliation. With this information in hand, investigators obtained a search warrant that same day and returned to the house. This time, though, they came armed with luminol, which showed that no matter how much cleaning had been done, evidence of a crime remained. Numerous possible bloodstains, approximately 20 according to the Charlie Project, were located inside the home and were subsequently sent for DNA testing. Sheriff Bill Franklin told True Crime Daily that the amount of blood indicated great violence had taken place inside the home. Most of the stains appeared in the bedrooms and bathrooms, and Jerry had admitted to burning several items in the garden, including Evan's bed. Furthermore, authorities noticed that a new security system had been installed, and there was no footage available from the day that Susan and Evan supposedly left or from the day they allegedly came back to collect their belongings and vandalize the home. Investigators later confirmed that electronics had been seized from the residence, adding that the search history on the computer taken was not what they'd have expected from an average person. Unfortunately for investigators, the DNA testing on the bloodstains was inconclusive due to the cleaning chemicals used. Still, authorities continued to search for clues. They found out that on June 1st, Jerry had dropped Susan's dogs off at a shelter and changed his security system. 3 days later, he started picking up renovation supplies. Then, on July 1st, over a month after the disappearance, he filed for divorce. The divorce was granted on November 15th. It has been noted that there were some inconsistencies in Jerry's story, with small details, including the color of the spray paint Susan used to deface the house and the type of vehicle she and her son left in. These details changed throughout his numerous interviews. Upon speaking with neighbors, law enforcement discovered that Jerry had begun burning things in the back garden on Memorial Day weekend. The remnants of Evan's bed, smashed up and charred, were discovered, with neighbors adding that there was a strong smell of plastic in the neighborhood as Jerry burned items. Wild scent dogs were brought in to help find any useful evidence, and the dogs led their handlers to the burn barrel. Nothing damning was discovered inside it. Since Susan's disappearance, there has been no activity on her phone, credit cards, or social media. Likewise, Evan's phone and social media have laid dormant since he went missing. He has also not been registered at other schools, and his prescriptions have not been refilled. Furthermore, he was due to undergo dental surgery shortly after he went missing and never made his appointment. Susan's friend Holly noted that despite Jerry's story, there was no other man in her life, and added that she had changed her mind about leaving her husband. So why would she just take off one day? Holly doesn't believe that Susan left of her own volition, telling the Wetumpka Herald in 2018. She would not just disappear. She wouldn't have left her 10-year-old daughter. She wouldn't go without talking to her and seeing her. She also has theorized that the email she had received from Susan, in which she claimed she had reconciled with her husband, may have been written and sent by Jerry. Susan's other loved ones have echoed similar sentiments, pointing out that the 43-year-old was a devoted pet parent and wouldn't simply abandon her 2 dogs either. Several areas around the family home were searched in the months following the disappearance, but no new clues have been found to help law enforcement bring the case to a close. No suspects have been named in the case, and Jerry Osborne remains the only person of interest, though he has maintained his innocence since 2017. Captain Troy Evans of the Elmore County Sheriff's Office told Al.com, "There were several pieces of evidence and several things that were odd and seemed to point in a certain direction. Obviously, nothing to the degree that we had probable cause." He also discussed law enforcement search efforts, stating, "We searched the immediate area around the house, the neighborhood, and the wooded areas there. Every theory and every option that has come available to us, or that has come to our attention, we have tried to rule those out, and so far have alleviated all of those." Captain Evans also declined to call the case cold, noting, "To me, that insinuates it's just sitting somewhere and we're not doing anything on it. We are still monitoring news media sources. Anytime there's a body found around the area, we do try to reach out to the law enforcement agency and just make sure they're aware of what we've got. I mean, it's not something we're actively doing stuff on every day, but As things come up, we're still trying to do as much as we can. Jerry has never been charged in connection with the case. He remained at the home on Waterview Lane until early 2020, having put the building up for sale on December 14, 2019. It sold 3 months later. As of 2021, he was living 30 minutes from Holtville with another woman and her children. The pair got engaged on January 25, 2020, the same day he had married Susan in 2014. 43-year-old Susan Lynn Osborne and her son, 14-year-old Evan Eric Chartrand, have been missing since May 29, 2017 from Holtville, Alabama. Susan is described as a white woman with brown hair, blue eyes, and pierced ears. She is 5'3" and weighed over 120 when she was last seen. Her son, Evan, is described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes. At the time of his disappearance, he was 5'7" and weighed 160. Evan is known to have medical issues that require prescription medication and regular doctor visits, making his disappearance particularly concerning. Foul play is suspected in both cases. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Susan Osborne or her son, Evan Chartrand, you can contact the Elmore County Sheriff's Department at 300-34-567 JDB546. Alternatively, you can call Crime Stoppers at 334-251-7867. Moving on to the next case. Tony Jones. When faced with the choice of traveling across a country or earning money, a working holiday can offer the best of both worlds. This idea of working while exploring different cities and sites was what drew 20-year-old Anthony John Jones, known as Tony. A native of Perth, Western Australia, Tony planned to spend 6 months traveling on a working holiday and was scheduled to return home shortly after he mysteriously disappeared in 1982. Before vanishing, Tony had spent time in Adelaide, Melbourne, Canberra, and Sydney. While these trips were mostly brief, he did spend several months in Brisbane before he and his brother Tim decided it was time to start heading home. For 3 weeks, the 20-year-old hitchhiked while his brother traveled by bicycle, and they kept in contact by phoning relatives and leaving messages for one another. While on their way to Townsville, Queensland, the pair stopped at Mackay and Airlie Beach. When they reached Townsville, they spent a week together in a caravan with 2 other travelers. Once more deciding that it was time to move, Tim began the 559-mile trek to Mount Isa, while Tony opted to set off alone on October 28th for a trip to the Cairns. He arrived back in Townsville 6 days later on November 3rd, where he called his family and girlfriend back home. By this time, Tim had already reached Mount Isa, while their mother informed Tony that she had sent the pair $150 to split between them. This was the last time that Tony was heard from. After this point, his calls ceased. His bank account was left untouched, and he never reached Mount Isa where his brother was waiting. After waiting for a few days, Tim realized something must be wrong. Back in Perth, the rest of the family grew concerned as they hadn't heard from the 20-year-olds, and neither had his girlfriend. Despite their growing alarm, the family waited 8 days after their last phone call with him to report him missing. They hoped that he was simply having trouble finding someone to give him a lift to Mount Isa, but it soon became apparent that this wasn't the issue. It is believed that Tony went missing on the Flinders Highway, which is about 487 miles long and runs from Townsville to Cloncurry. The remote road which connects the outback to Queensland is said to have a disturbing reputation. 11 individuals disappeared from or were murdered along the highway between 1970 and 2018. Isolated and barren, former Queensland detective Jim Slade stated that the area was a place of opportunity for someone wishing to cause harm to another. Further fueling the eerie notoriety of Flanders Highway is Dr. Susanna Fay, a University of Queensland expert in place-based crime, who stated, quote, "The 70s-80s is the highest point of Australian violent crime, and I do think that we continue to come back to this kind of crime of opportunity. You do have these tight-knit communities, so it's very possible that people will see things. But because outsiders coming through is somewhat normal, they may not even realize what they've seen. Much of the investigation into Tony's disappearance is messy, and the case has gained a reputation as one of Australia's most high-profile missing persons cases, due to the fact it was horrendously mishandled by the Queensland Police. Reportedly, many of the police force's recruits were later charged with or tried for corruption. According to news.com.au, it is emblematic of the Queensland police culture during the 1980s, which the Fitzgerald Inquiry found to be debilitated by misconduct, inefficiency, incompetence, and deficient leadership. The Fitzgerald Inquiry involved an investigation into police corruption and misconduct in Queensland. The biggest lead in the case appeared in January of 1983. Just months after Tony was last heard from, when investigators received an anonymous letter in which the writer claimed to know the whereabouts of the 20-year-old's remains. The envelope bore a Cairns postmark, a location Tony had visited in the days before he vanished, and simply read, "I believe body of A.J. Jones, buried in or near Fullerton Riverbed within 100 yards south side Flinders Highway." Lochiel, the chilling letter prompted detectives to order a search of the area described with this exploration, taking 2 whole days. But in the end, they found nobody and dismissed the note as an unpleasant hoax. Inquest documents would later reveal that in the weeks leading up to the search, the dry riverbed was filled with about 20 feet of water, which meant there was not much hope of finding any trace of Tony or his possessions. Tony's family, for their part, did not believe the letter was deceptive and began urging the police to pull DNA from it, which could help identify the killer, or at least a strong witness. However, the police repeatedly declined to do so. It wasn't until 2007 that the authorities revealed the letter had been misplaced in the years following its arrival at the police station. Another horrendously botched piece of evidence came from a witness who told the police that he had joined Tony along with an older man at the Rising Sun Hotel in Townsville. The older man had reportedly picked the 20-year-old up earlier in the day and suggested they head to the pub for a meal before visiting Charters Towers. The witness engaged in light conversation with the two, who revealed their plans. As far as we know, providing this witness was correct in identifying Tony, this was the last time the young man was seen alive. The witness described the older man to a police sketch artist and was able to provide details about the man's vehicle, along with identifying scars on his arms. But it wasn't until 1992, an entire decade after Tony's disappearance, that the sketch of this man was made public. It is believed that the police delayed revealing the image to the public because the older man described bore a striking resemblance to one of the police's own retired officers. After the image was published on November 2nd, 1992, law enforcement was flooded with calls that claimed the image matched that of a former policeman named Mervyn Henry Stevenson. The arm scars described were a good match to those Stevenson had, and his vehicle was very similar to the one described in the Identicut. At the time of Tony's disappearance, Stevenson had recently retired from the force. He was seen to be a clean and decorated officer who had started in Coon, a coastal town that, as of 2016, has a population of just 364 people. And eventually he worked his way through the ranks to become a superintendent in charge of the Townsville Police District. However, a few years after he retired, his reputation was reduced to rubble when corruption charges were laid against him. A police report alleged Stevenson of being involved in cattle stealing, failing to investigate a slew of drug-related offenses, and also declining to examine the dubious suicide of another officer. However, Stevenson was never investigated for any of these charges because Police Commissioner Terry Lewis refused to approve the inquisition. Notably, Lewis was later charged with 23 counts of perjury, corruption, and forgery. He was stripped of his previously bestowed knighthood and given 14 years behind bars. Stevenson, meanwhile, died in 2001. 30 years after Tony's disappearance in early 2002, the results of a long-delayed coroner's inquest were revealed. It was found that despite nobody being recovered, the 20-year-old was a victim of homicide. His death certificate was eventually issued in 2006. In 2007, Tony's family reviewed the inquest documents and discovered that numerous major leads were ignored by investigators back in the 1980s. Numerous witnesses who came forward in 1982 were never interviewed until 2001, while much of the case's statements and evidence were either dismissed or missing altogether. Furthermore, the investigation didn't even start until 3 days after the 20-year-old was reported missing. It was also revealed that somehow Tony's dental records were lost, and the police declined to collect a report from the hospital about the treatment the young man had received shortly before he vanished. Officers also failed to assist the family in searching the area around the phone booth where Tony had last called from. The family took it upon themselves to go door to door to conduct inquiries. Obviously distressed by all this information, Tony's family petitioned the Queensland Attorney General to reopen the investigation, but their requests were continuously disregarded until 2010. During this year, Tony and Tim's other brother Brian sent the Attorney General a pair of the 20-year-old's shoes with a note that asked him to walk a day in the shoes of a victim of Queensland crime. After a campaign with the theme of "Walk a Day in My Shoes" was launched, the inquest was reopened the following day. In 2011, it was discovered that even more evidence had been neglected by the authorities. The family were told by a grazier that in 1982, he had handed over evidence to investigators when he came across a campsite in Cloncurry. Along with a friend who was a retired police officer, the grazier found what was left of some camping gear, and among it, a letter addressed to Tony signed by the 20-year-old's mother. Despite the fact this evidence was incredibly important, it seemed to simply languish in the hold of the police until it was eventually lost or destroyed. After the family were told about this evidence, they insisted that a thorough investigation of the area where it was found was carried out. The search occurred, but only after 9 more months had passed. It took place on October 11th and involved 8 police officers and 4 state emergency service workers, all of whom spent 6 hours combing through the area. Unsurprisingly, given the passage of time, there was nothing left of Tony's belongings. A few days following the search, a former inmate came forward and revealed that his old cellmate, Michael Laundress, had admitted to the slaying of a young man 18 years after Tony's disappearance. The former inmates didn't make the connection to Tony right away, given that almost 2 decades had passed since the crime. It wasn't until the inquest was reopened that he realized Tony's disappearance may have been the one his cellmate was talking about. Laundress reportedly stated, "I did a bloke in out near Mount Isa. He was hitchhiking at the time and I buried him out there." Frustratingly, due to repeated delays, stalls in the inquest and the replacement of the coroner during the middle of it all, Laundress died in October of 2015, having never made a statement. At some point during the inquest, a tip-off was received by the police that a person of interest in the case had given away a rifle, which appeared to be the same as the dismantled one Tony had been carrying at the time of his disappearance. However, investigators delayed interviewing the witness for many months. Reportedly, when they finally did speak with this witness, authorities showed him an image of the wrong gun and dismissed the line of inquiry when the individual couldn't identify it. The weapon is described as a .22 caliber rifle with a dark red stained stock and serial number 257435. In December of 1982, the town of Hughenden became a place of interest when around 5 individuals alleged that between 12th and 14th November, they interacted with and spoke with a young male hitchhiker who resembled Tony. Following this reveal, investigators spoke with locals and collected statements where they discovered differing accounts from witnesses. One described the young man as being of Aboriginal descent, while another called him an Italian tourist. The other remaining statements referred to a man with a full beard. One witness in particular recalled speaking with Tony at around 8 p.m. on November 12th and noted he had what she called an Abraham Lincoln-style beard. This lead subsequently fell through as Tony had recently shaved off his beard in the days before his disappearance. Additionally, he had not used his bank accounts or called his girlfriend or family. This indicated that something untoward had happened to him on or around November 3rd. In a separate news report, further witnesses later emerged who claimed that they all knew of one individual, though some reports say it was two men who had confessed to the murder of a hitchhiker in Huyenden. The timeline for this alleged slaying lines up as Tony would have been passing through the town at the time. There are allegations that Tony's body was disposed of in a slaughter yard following his death. In July of 2017, the coroner ruled that there was insufficient evidence for a search of the slaughterhouse to be carried out using ground-penetrating radar, much to the family's disappointment. In February of 2016, during the lead-up to the new inquest, it was confirmed that Mervyn Stevenson, the retired police officer believed to have been seen with Tony during his last days, would be named a suspect. A secondary artist sketch was created by Townsville-Bolson artist Chris Brunton in the 1990s, which attracted several more leads. These leads had not been investigated by the time of the 2002 inquest, and the coroner encouraged the authorities to look into them, particularly in relation to two individuals who were named persons of interest. The individuals went by Pickering and Douglas. However, it took 7 years before the police acted on these instructions. By this time, both men were dead. Another suspect arose several years after the first few did in 1999, when an internal police memo obtained by the family noted, quote, "I have also received a letter from a retired grazier who was named a suspect by the name of blank. And I note that his history indicates that he is most probably a blank, and I consider that he should be interviewed. I have attached a copy of the letter." However, neither the grazier's letter nor any further details pertaining to this line of inquiry were revealed or discussed at the 2002 inquest, nor were they made available to the family. Even Millet, an Australian serial killer known for the backpacker murders in which he killed 2 men and 5 women between 1989 and 1992, was initially considered a person of interest, but was ruled out of the investigation in 2016. In the years since, the family has continued to be stonewalled and face infuriating hurdles that bring the case to a standstill time and time again. Many witnesses with information have started to bypass the police altogether and directly contact the family. Another of Tony's brothers, Mark, told news.com.au, Detective Sergeant Brendan Stevenson has become so hostile towards the family that he has sought legal advice about possible action against the family for criticisms made during the inquest, as well as to find legal reasons not to keep the family updated as to any progress with the investigations. At the time of the recording of this video, the most recent update in Tony's case comes from 9Now, which appears to be the only news outlet reporting on allegations that the 20-year-old was killed in a pub brawl. 3 women have come forward with the story, but the men who are reportedly involved have denied any involvement in Tony's disappearance. Tony's mysterious disappearance in 1982 is considered the catalyst for the creation of Australia's National Missing Persons Week in 1988. The week aims to raise awareness about the tragedy and the lasting impact on the families of missing individuals. In 2008, Tony's photograph and details were featured on a pack of cold case playing cards, which were distributed to inmates in several Queensland prisons. Unfortunately, the cards did not lead to any breakthroughs, and Tony's case remains unsolved. He was last seen and heard from in Townsville, Queensland, on November 3, 1982. Tony is described as a white male with green eyes and brown hair. At the time of his disappearance, he was about 5 foot 7 inches tall with a slim build. If you have any information about his case, you can contact Crime Stoppers Australia at 1800-333-0. Moving on to the next case. Samina Imam. On Christmas Eve of 2014, as the world buzzed with holiday excitement, 34-year-old Samina Imam, a marketing manager for Costco in Cardiff, South Wales, was getting ready for the festivities. She had plans to visit her family in Essex the day after Christmas, But first, she was looking forward to a special date that evening. Before meeting her date, Samina made a quick stop at Costco to pick up a bottle of wine. Little did she know, this would be the last time anyone would see her. As Christmas came and went without Samina returning home to visit her family, her absence grew more concerning. Her friends and family reached out to her repeatedly, their worry mounting with each passing hour. Days went by, yet there was still no sign of Samina. Where had she gone? What could explain her sudden disappearance? Cardiff, located in South Wales, on the southeastern coast of the country, is the capital of Wales. Cardiff transforms into a winter wonderland during Christmas. The city is adorned with twinkling lights, charming Christmas markets pop up, and festive activities abound. For history buffs, Cardiff Castle stands tall, painting pictures of knights and ancient nobility within its walls. Wandering through Cardiff Market is a feast for the senses, with scents of freshly baked bread and spices filling the air, drawing you into a world of local flavors and crafts. Yet, Cardiff isn't just about its history of market. It's alive with laughter, chats in the streets, and the genuine Welsh hospitality that fills its pubs and restaurants. From museums to the Wales Millennium Centre, Cardiff offers diverse experiences for everyone. But back on Christmas 2014, though the city gleamed under the warm glow of a million lights, unsettling shadows lurked beneath the surface. Before we continue, we want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's move on with the video. Samina Imam's life began in 1980 in the UK, nurtured by her loving father, Imam Dean, and a mother whose name remains cherished within the family. Her Pakistani heritage was a vibrant thread that wove through her life, enriching her with traditions and values. Samina's youth blossomed within the walls of Loxford High School in 1998, where she emerged as a bright and ambitious young woman. As a 34-year-old, Samina found herself in Coventry, where she took on the role of marketing manager at Costco. While details of her personal life were scarce, her presence was deeply valued, bringing joy to her family and colleagues. In 2014, amidst the bustling aisles of Costco, Samina's path crossed with 41-year-old Roger Cooper, a warehouse manager whose 2 decades of experience in logistics had kept him rooted in the same store. Their encounter marked the beginning of a new chapter in Samina's life, one filled with the promise of fresh beginnings. Everything seemed to be falling into place for Samina. Her days were filled with ease and contentment. However, on the eve of Christmas in 2014, an unforeseen event shattered her world. As Samina eagerly awaited her date with Roger on Christmas Eve, she had also made special arrangements to visit her family. In particular, she planned to spend time with her ailing mother after the holiday festivities. On the eve of Christmas 2014, Roger pledged to spend the holidays with Samina, leading her to book a lavish 2-night stay at the Malmaison Hotel in Birmingham. With a $500 paid, she carefully arranged for meals to be served in their room, setting the stage for what was supposed to be a romantic Christmas celebration. As the clock struck 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve, Samina concluded her shift at the store. Little did she know that the journey ahead would deviate from the plans she had envisioned. After a brief stop at a liquor store to get a bottle of champagne, she began on her fateful drive toward the Malmaison Hotel. On her way there, she had a final conversation with her sister, during which she inquired about their mother's health. Samina assured her sister that she would be arriving at their parents' home on Boxing Day, December 26, 2014, eager to partake in the family's Christmas celebrations in Essex. This conversation underscored Samina's commitment to her family and her eagerness to be with them during the festive season. However, her unexplained disappearance following this conversation left her family deeply concerned. What was more concerning was the fact that Simeon even texted her friends wishing them a Merry Christmas, but then suddenly ceased to reply. The abrupt halt in communication, coupled with Simeon's failure to fulfill her planned visit, added to the distress surrounding her disappearance. This led to the police being alerted by Semina's family on December 26, 2014. The investigative saga commenced swiftly, and authorities were trying to do everything to get to the bottom of this crime. Media outlets, both local and social, rallied the community, amplifying the search efforts to locate her. A missing persons report was filed, prompting authorities to step in and join the search. The police talked to Semina's co-workers at the Costco in Coventry, who provided a crucial detail. One retail worker informed police that he last saw her departing the store around 4 p.m. on December 24th. It was the last time she was ever seen alive. Surveillance footage provided glimpses into Simeon's last known movements, leaving her workplace, purchasing champagne, and departing in her car. Despite these visual clues, her precise location remained elusive. The West Midlands Police Department turned to cell tower data, using it to approximate Simeon's whereabouts. On December 30th, 2014, investigators traced Simeon's movements to Leicester, precisely to the residence of David Cooper, Roger's brother, on Christmas Eve at 5 p.m. At the same time, Roger's phone record showed that he was also in the area. It seemed unlikely that it was a coincidence they were both there at the exact same time, raising questions about why they were there together. As the investigation got more complicated, they wanted to know who Semina was going to meet on Christmas Eve. Their attention zeroed in on Roger Cooper, the person she was supposed to spend the evening and the next night with. Roger Cooper was brought in for questioning on January 1st, 2015. Now he was the main person the investigators were looking at closely. While they were questioning Roger for details, a new piece of information emerged. Remember how Semina's last mobile signal led to David Cooper's location? Investigators considered interviewing David Cooper at the same time. While probing David Cooper's possible involvement, the investigators couldn't ignore a nagging question. If Semina and Roger had already booked hotel rooms, why were they at David's house? This added layer of mystery intensified the suspicions surrounding the case. Before diving deeper into the story, understanding the Cooper brothers' backgrounds becomes important. Their lives and connections might be essential in understanding the mystery surrounding Semina's case. Let's start with Simeon's Christmas Eve date, Roger Cooper. He was born in Leicester around 1973 and excelled as a manager at the Birmingham Costco warehouse. He was admired for his leadership. However, beyond this public role, Roger led a secretive life known only to a few. Juggling multiple affairs, including one with Semina Imam and another unnamed Costco employee, he maintained a long-term relationship with his partner, Mira Chavda. Shockingly, Semina was unaware of his long-term commitment. This hidden reality exposed a more complicated and problematic side to Roger than anyone had realized. Roger's carefully constructed facade began to crumble when Simeon discovered the shocking truth. Learning through a co-worker about Roger's other relationships shattered her trust as it revealed a web of deceit and hidden liaisons. Now, turning our attention to Roger's brother, 39-year-old David Cooper, he added a surprising twist to the unfolding mystery. David, a former soldier, managed a cafe and worked as a doorman. Intriguingly, Simeon's last cell phone signal led investigators to David's address in Leicester. The bond between Roger and David extended beyond family. They shared a close-knit relationship. The brothers shared a mutual love for Star Wars, often using cryptic phrases from the movies to communicate with each other, either referring to the lore of the movies or events from their daily lives. That being said, it's here that the real puzzle surfaces. Did David share any connection with her? These questions loomed large over the investigation, casting a shadow of uncertainty over the ties between Semina, Roger, and now his brother David. Let's look at the dynamics of Semina Imam and Roger Cooper's relationship. Was it genuine, or was Roger merely using her? At first glance, Roger and Semina appeared to be just another couple, sharing laughter, secrets, and what seemed like genuine affection. Their connection was filled with playful banter and affectionate moments, a facade hiding the grim reality beneath the surface. Little did Samina know that she was just another woman in Roger's life. Despite his long-term commitment to his partner Mira, Roger found comfort in clandestine moments with Samina. At least, that's what Samina was made to believe. Initially, she didn't know that he was having a third relationship with another woman in the same store. Their relationship was shrouded in secrecy due to strict company policies against workplace relationships. Yet their bond grew stronger, blurring the lines between right and wrong, until Samina found herself hopelessly entangled. She saw a future with Roger, a peaceful life together, but there was a catch. He was already entangled in multiple relationships. Despite the red flags, Samina clung to the hope that Roger would leave his family for her. As their relationship deepened, Samina's desperation for a settled life intensified. She confronted Roger, issuing an ultimatum towards the end of 2014, divorce his wife or lose her forever. The facade of their perfect relationship shattered when Samina discovered Roger's infidelity, another lover hidden in the shadows of their workplace. Enraged and betrayed, she threatened to expose their affair to his wife and their employer. Roger, adept at manipulation, managed to soothe Samina's anger, convincing her of his loyalty and promising to file for divorce after the holidays. He also said they'd go away on Christmas Eve for 2 nights. It was at the very beginning of this ill-fated trip that Samina disappeared. Now, diving into the investigation, the police had their sights set firmly on Roger Cooper and were also wondering about the involvement of his brother David. On January 4th, 2015, Samina's car was found in Luton, about 65 miles away from Coventry. Her handbags, suitcases, and items she brought were missing. The lack of fingerprints made investigators suspicious, but there was another interesting detail. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone taller than Samina, possibly over 6 feet. This suggested that someone else used the car after her shopping trip. Additional evidence that the police found that pointed their suspicions towards the brothers involved multiple automatic number plate recognition hits tracking their vehicles between Coventry and Leicester. A Bellini bottle purchased by Miss Imam on Christmas Eve in Coventry was discovered in David's home fridge. While Roger was Samina's date, the presence of the bottle in David's house raises the question, how did the bottle end up at David's house? These details added complexity to the investigation. During the investigation, the brothers, David and Roger, firmly denied any involvement in the crime, but their text messages told a different story. They used cryptic phrases from the movies to communicate secretly. Phrases like Death Star complete, stay on target, and you are expected, Vader, hinted at a hidden plan. One particularly puzzling French message roughly translates to, there's no point, no score. The window of opportunity is closed, which caught attention. The message hinted at a closed opportunity or a missed chance. The detectives interpreted their Star Wars messages as alluding to Miss Imam's abduction and murder. While the majority of their exchanges appeared to center around Star Wars, another concerning detail caught attention: David Cooper's eBay purchase history. He had recently purchased chloroform, a substance well known for use to knock people out, but which also can be lethal in larger doses. When coupled with Samina's missing car and the various intriguing details, the plot thickened. After all the clues and circumstantial evidence pointed towards the Cooper brothers, they were arrested on suspicion of murder on January 7th, 2014, and brought in for questioning. During the interrogation of the Cooper brothers, subtle yet crucial disparities began to emerge in their narratives. Roger Cooper presented a detailed and emotionally charged account of his last encounter with Semenya, a level of detail and emotion that the police found excessive. Recognizing David Cooper as the more vulnerable of the two, investigators intensified their pressure on him. This strategic approach, when applied effectively, can yield significant results, particularly when the person under scrutiny remains unaware of their alleged accomplice's statement. While he initially did try to mislead them, eventually, the police learned what actually happened on that fateful Christmas Eve. Simeon had set off with Roger, believing they were headed to the Malmaison Hotel in Birmingham. Without Simeon's knowledge, Roger was secretly directing their journey away from Birmingham, heading instead to a hidden location in Leicester, Roger's brother, David Cooper's residence. As they arrived at David's house at Hughenden Drive around 5 p.m. on December 24th, Samina, unaware of her upcoming tragedy, greeted Roger's brother with genuine warmth. In a sudden and terrifying move, David and Roger launched themselves at Samina. The attack was horrifying. Samina's legs trembled, fear gripping her as she pleaded for help. She fought back, struggling against them, but David, with a cloth soaked in chloroform, covered her mouth and nose, silencing her cries until she couldn't breathe anymore. She faded away around 6:25 p.m., her efforts in vain against the overwhelming force. After the heinous act, Roger heartlessly headed back to Coventry, planning to spend Christmas Eve with his unsuspecting family. He left her body and her car with David, but it would take detectives some more time to figure out exactly what he had done with them. But David astonishingly confessed to assisting his brother in the horrendous act of killing Samina. The detectives learned that Samina tragically passed away due to chloroform toxicity. Investigators discovered compelling evidence in David's eBay purchase history, indicating a purchase of 200 ml of chloroform for Avion 12, which he alleged never arrived. Further inquiries revealed David's movements. Retrieving Simeon's BMW from Coventry on Boxing Day and later abandoning it in Luton, he meticulously wiped away any fingerprints and DNA from the vehicle using a cleaning agent, methodically covering his tracks. Later, he also reveals how he tried to hide Samina's lifeless body, the callous act of killing someone, and then referring to them as this thing, speaks volumes about the perpetrator's lack of empathy and respect for human life. Such an act speaks to a disturbing level of dehumanization, where the victim was stripped of their individuality and reduced to a mere object. This detached and callous language suggests that the act of killing was not just devoid of remorse, but potentially motivated by a deep-seated hatred or an animosity towards the victim. The dehumanizing language serves to further distance the perpetrator from the gravity of their actions, making it easier for them to justify and rationalize their behavior. David's continued refusal to disclose the location of Simeon's body cast a long shadow of suspicion over him. His fabricated stories about others taking the body away only raise further questions. The fabricated stories appear to be a desperate attempt to distance himself from the crime and deflect suspicion. Such behavior is characteristic of individuals who have something to hide, further fueling the flames of doubt surrounding their innocence. While David initially misled the authorities about Simeon's whereabouts, a crucial piece of evidence emerged that ultimately led to the discovery of the truth. A friend of David's, prompted by his arrest, came forward and revealed that David had entrusted him with a set of keys, including one that belonged to an allotment he owned in Leicester. The police, acting swiftly on this information, descended upon the allotment, carrying the weight of hope and determination. On January 16, 2015, the long-held silence surrounding Simeon's disappearance was shattered, leaving hearts broken. Upon arrival at David's allotment, an unsettling sight greeted them. A sheet of tarpaulin lay crumpled on the ground, with a suspicious mound of earth beneath it. Footprints, fresh and clear, marked the surrounding area. As they carefully excavated the soil, the grim reality unfolded. Samina Imam's body was found in Leicester, owned by David Cooper, a seemingly ordinary structure now at the center of a disturbing discovery. The haphazard manner in which the body was concealed spoke volumes about the perpetrator's state of mind. It was a stark contrast to the meticulous planning seemingly evident in the earliest stages of the crime. The haste and lack of proper concealment suggested that their focus was solely on the act itself, with little thought given to evading detection or ensuring a successful cover-up. This botched attempt ultimately led to their undoing and exposed the truth to the light of justice. Most disturbingly, Samina's body was found wrapped in cling film and a sleeping bag that belonged to David Cooper, serving as concrete evidence of his involvement in this tragic crime. Adding to the grimness was a sign hanging on the shed, its message blunt. "Don't wind me up. I'm running out of places to hide the bodies." The West Midlands police investigation was determined and thorough. They followed every lead carefully, leaving no stone unturned, and pieced together the events leading to Samina's tragic end. What made this ordeal particularly unsettling wasn't only the discovery of Samina's remains. The sign, meant as a joke, became a chilling confession, revealing the darkness lurking beneath ordinary surfaces. It was as if the perpetrator was challenging the law enforcement itself. Post-mortem examinations confirmed that the Cardiff-based shop worker met her demise due to chloroform. Additionally, a peculiar mix of metallic elements, antimony, cadmium, tin, mercury, and arsenic, was likely administered to Samina Imam in a liquid form. During the 8-week trial, the chilling truth emerged. Roger Cooper carefully planned to silence Samina Imam for months, fearing she would expose their affair. The brothers, 41-year-old Roger and 39-year-old David Cooper, remained composed during their trial, avoiding eye contact as the jury unanimously convicted them at Birmingham Crown Court. Later, on October 20th, 2015, during the trial, Roger made a shocking admission, revealing that a seemingly puzzling message, "You are expected, Vader," was actually a coded reference to Miss Imam. He claimed it was part of a surveillance effort to determine if she was involved with someone else. But the truth was, the brothers' first attempt to harm Samina Imam took place way before in December at Soil Hill Premier Inn. Samina was a regular guest and planned to spend the night there following a Christmas party. Under the guise of a surprise, Roger had instructed Samina to meet him at the hotel, claiming to have booked a room for them. However, the surprise was a lie. No room had been booked, and Roger wasn't planning to be there. Meanwhile, David, Roger's brother, lurked in a rented car parked in the hotel's car park, prepared to abduct Samina. To communicate their plan, the brothers relied on cryptic messages coded in Star Wars references like "Death Star Complete" and "Stay on Target." Stay on target. "You are expected, Vader." However, on that day, the taxi stopped right at the entrance, which didn't give David a chance to get close to Samina. The plan failed, and Samina safely entered the hotel. Frustrated, David sent a message to his brother in broken French, which translated to, "There's no point, no score." The window of opportunity is closed. Samina, just 34 and one of Roger's lovers, was later overpowered on Christmas Eve of 2014 at David Cooper's home, meeting a tragic death by chloroform. Despite their calm facade and planning, justice caught up with the brothers. Arrested under suspicion a week before Simeon's body was discovered, they couldn't escape the truth uncovered by post-mortem tests. Their arrest and subsequent conviction by Judge Thomas on October 21st, 2015, led to a life sentence for each with a minimum of 30 years of prison time. While sentencing the Cooper brothers, the killers, for life, Judge Thomas told the siblings, "The use of poison in a case such as this demonstrates a cold-blooded intention to kill, regardless of the consequences. You work together hand in glove in planning and carrying out the murder of a joyful and bubbly young woman, brutally betrayed by a man she loved and his brother." DCI Caroline Marsh, senior investigating officer, shared her views on this case outside court. She said, "I would say this is the most callous offense I've ever investigated. Most murders that occur are spontaneous events driven by anger or jealousy. Whereas in this case, what we uncovered was weeks of planning to kill Semenya and a really unusual cause of death. We rarely see chloroform homicides. It's a mystery to the investigation why David Cooper would do something like this for his brother, an extreme act to kill a woman that he hardly knew." Their cryptic messages and meticulous planning failed in the face of justice, ensuring they'll spend all of their remaining Christmases behind bars, serving their deserved punishment. The anguish of losing Samina in such cruel circumstances was overwhelming for the family. The statement released by Samina's younger brother, Imran Imam, reflected the profound impact of her loss. He mourned not only the loss of his sister, but also the absence of her guidance and support during challenging times. Imran expressed the torment of contemplating Samina's final moments and the pain of not being able to seek her counsel anymore. The reminders of her absence were constant, with everyday triggers evoking memories that intensified their grief. This made it even more challenging to come to terms with their loss. The family's sentiments echoed a collective sense of shock, sorrow, and fear as they grappled with the reality of Samina's untimely and tragic demise, leaving an irreparable void in their lives. As we close this chapter on the tragedy of Samina Imam, it's impossible not to be shaken by the sheer senselessness of it all. Roger had countless opportunities to avoid this irreversible path. He could have chosen honesty, transparency, or even simply ending the relationship. Instead, he and his brother set in motion a calculated and cruel course of action that led to the loss of a vibrant life. This case serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise when personal desires are placed above basic human decency. Let it stand as a cautionary tale, urging us all to choose compassion and integrity over expediency and self-interest. May Simeon's memory inspire us to uphold the values of honesty, respect, and accountability, so that such a tragedy may never again harm an innocent soul. Thanks for watching.